You're watching Managing Day to Day with me, Christina Laster, and National Parents Union. I hope you're all well. I hope that you are all thriving. Hello to America's beautiful children. We love you. And so as we are entering into our end of the week, I hope that you parents, caretakers, and families have some plans to, rest, refresh, relax. We've been doing it. We're managing moment by moment, day by day, and I am just so thrilled that I'm able to bring on time, relevant information to you on this show. And so today we have two special guests, and I'd like to bring them out, Dr. McHenry and Jerry. Hello. Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Fantastic.
Can you both tell our viewers who you are, where you are, what you do?
I'll go first. My name is Dr. Darlena McHenry, and I'm the CEO of St. Carey's Center Smart Academy. SMART stands for Science, Math, Art, Reading, and Technology. We're an after-school enrichment program, and we're looking at how we're going to serve our parents now that we've had a game changer in education in terms of most districts providing services online and how we're going to support our families and our children.
That's wonderful.
Yes, my name is Jerry L. Green, the Black Student Advocate. We advocate for Black parents, Black students, and Black school employees against school districts K through 12. And we hold school districts accountable when the playing field is not equitable for either employee or the student.
Thank you guys for coming on today. I really appreciate it. To all of our viewers watching, a lot of us have experienced some challenges through the traditional education system. We've been talking about those challenges and utilizing this time really as a way to think forward on how we're going to educate our children effectively, make sure that they thrive. And so, Darlena, your experiences with educating children in the system, how are you acquainted with the challenges we face, and what have you done to overcome those challenges?
Okay, one of the first things that's obvious to me is that the automated systems, they don't work in a homeschooling environment. They're fine for 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day. A child gets on and they practice their math skills, they practice their language arts. But if they're not interactive and personalized, then they can't really capture the child's attention. And I'll give you an example, social media. Most kids are attached to their phones. And why are they attached to their phones? Because the content is personalized. People are responding to what they post. They're being very specific. It's targeted at them. And a lot of AI, even though it looks for a pattern of errors, and then it corrects those errors, is still not personalized. So when we talk about putting our programming online, when we talk about serving the needs of our children and our family, we're gonna have to have something that's more responsive. We're gonna actually have to have access to a person, and that person walk you through some activities, or that person is responding to your direct questions in terms of leading you through that assignment. But just putting you on a computer program where this artificial intelligence responds to you, that's not going to engage our students. So we're looking at using those systems because they can be great for practice, but recognizing that we're gonna have to offer something that's interactive, and we're gonna have to offer something which allows our children to be teachers. So we're gonna have to learn how to share power. The best way to learn something is to teach it. And so if you're sharing with other children what you've learned and your strategy and how you did it, and you're interacting with them and they're questioning you, then you're more likely to retain that information because it's personal to you. So it's a matter of looking at delivering services in a personal manner, which still addresses the issues in terms of increasing achievement, increasing knowledge, and doing it in a way that's safe. And another one of the issues we're going to have to come across is how do we keep our kids safe during the pandemic? We want to make sure that there is a real-time response where somebody is actually seeing them like you're seeing us. So where we have some live classes, so they will feel connected and they will know that there's another human being out there, that if something does go wrong when they're at home alone, if they have to be home alone, that there can be some kind of response or security, somebody you can reach out to and somebody to take action. So the way we delivered instruction before, that era has passed. And we're going to have to look at disinfecting. We're going to have to look at providing some services in person, continuing to build connection, continuing to build relationship, and letting our kids know that they're loved and valued.
Yes, I totally agree. And I appreciate that. We'll come back to you on how to utilize the technology to bring in culturally congruent educators, right?
Absolutely.
Into homes, because I think that right now is a perfect opportunity to be able to do that. And so children are able to relate to people and learn from people that look like them and are representative of their families. And so, Jerry, talking about valuing children and, you know, the things that have taken place that me and you have battled over and over again. What is your experience now with parents and educators and the challenges that they face?
This is one of the best times in education and going to be one of the most transformational times we've ever seen. What this COVID has done is expose that teachers can't teach and that they have no relationship with the Black student. When Black students come into an environment and then teachers could close the door, then we didn't know what was going on. And parents would think that their kid and their student wasn't paying attention. And now parents had the first opportunity to hear what was being said and done. And now they're saying, I was wrong as a parent for continue to send you into that war zone. And with the war zone, the staff of the school are the landmines that these kids are trying to navigate and be whole. But when we send our kids into these environments, again, the staff didn't have the interest in them. They didn't have the latitude that other students had, and now it's been exposed. I was on a call maybe 3 weeks after schools were dismissed, and one of the administrators actually on the call was trying to discipline a student that they hadn't seen in 3 weeks. So it shows the mentality of where the administration is. And I deal with administrators, everyone from a preschool teacher up into the superintendent as liars, because they all have lied to me. To understand the name of the game with school districts, with the staff, is protect Queen Bee, which is the district. So anything they have to do to protect the district, they're going to do it. What other industry do you know that they say, let's get your teacher's input or the employee's input versus thinking about the customer first? What other industry gets to blame the customer, meaning the Black student and the Black parent, saying parents don't care and Black students can't learn? You don't hear any other industry blaming the customer but school districts. This business model has been exposed, and it's a great opportunity for parents to continue to homeschool their students because their needs never are being met. The Black students is treated like the new cotton, or the school district is just pimping the kids, continue to have failing scores and continue to get money. It's ridiculous, and the BS needs to stop.
Right, and the only way that, you know, some people say, well, we don't have the funding, but you shouldn't still keep your kid enrolled in systems that are utilizing the funding to not educate them or miseducate them, right? I have seen the effects of the way that our children have been treated and the way that it changes them. We're talking about structural, institutional exploitation. The kids enter one way and they exit a way that they were never intended to be. And so while
exactly what you're saying, you have Black students, and when they're 2, 3, and 4 years old, they're geniuses. Then we send them into these killing fields, and by the time they're 11, we hoping they can just graduate high school. Something is going on within that institution, that building, and with the so-called teachers who catch a check every 2 weeks, but are not delivering a quality product to the Black student. Again, parents, you have trained your student and have done homeschooling up until they're 4 or 5. So you can do this. You just need more support and the actual encouragement to do it. But everything around them is telling them to send their kids to school.
Right.
And we know that's not the best thing. And we see the results when numbers haven't changed in over 20 years with the education gap between white students and Black students.
Right, and that is, recorded.
At this point, what I'm looking at doing is doing some research on increasing the achievement of African-American students in math. There is a substantial amount of research out there that shows that this kind of soft bigotry, this feeling sorry for Black students, this assumption that they aren't, that they can't do math, that is actually the major factor in killing achievement. And I know that people consider themselves to be being kind or being benevolent, but the implicit bias when a Black student goes into a math class, that somehow if you are physically active, if you're a kinesthetic learner, if you are, if you need to touch things, if you need to interact with your materials, if you need to discuss what it is that you're learning, that somehow if you can't keep your mouth shut and you can't have a pencil and paper in your hand and follow along with what someone is saying to you without any kind of interaction, that you are a deficit learner. And
Right.
that mentality is shown by at least the last, we can just focus on the last 10 years of research. That mentality is very, very harmful. Assuming that a child comes in behind, assuming that they're behind, and then acting on that belief and doing remedial work as opposed to introducing new concepts in an interactive atmosphere, that is the exact actions that are keeping our students behind. And so I have done, and I will love to share it with you, just a review of the literature in terms of different research studies around the country involving Black students and involving students walking into the classroom, walking into the program, and being given the message that you don't know this, or this is difficult for you. And people mean to be helpful. And I can give you a specific example with me as a postdoctorate researcher. I went into this neuropsych program and the instructor made a joke about selling somebody down the river. And so he told the class, I was the only African-American student in the class, this man is internationally known, that selling somebody down the river is what Black people used to say to grandma when she was being difficult, that if you don't, act appropriately, that I'll sell you down the river. Well, everybody on this call understands that Black people did not have the power to sell anybody down the river, that was a tactic used during slavery, that if you weren't compliant, if you weren't obedient, that they would separate you from your family and they would sell you down the river and you would never be seen again by your loved ones. So of course I corrected him and said, no, that is not where that expression came from. That expression was used by white plantation owners to threaten Black people to be compliant and to stay in their place. They would tell you that if you ran away from the plantation, and they caught you, they would sell you down the river and you would never see your loved ones again. So of course this professor was insulted. He treated me differently after then. And one of my classmates during the break came up to me and said, I know this is hard for you, but you'll catch on. It was not hard for me. I was insulted. And because the professor felt insulted because I corrected him, even though we both have doctorates, it's a postdoctorate program, my relationship with my classmates, my relationships with that professor shifted after that. Now I'm an adult. And this was
Right.
20 years ago. Think about this in a classroom where a 7-year-old African-American child corrects his Anglo-American teacher in front of his classmates, and she's embarrassed because of lack of cultural sensitivity, then those children will treat him different and she will treat him different, and he will start to withdraw, participate less in order to get the attention away from him. And that's what's silently killing our children.
You know, and that's so true. Talking about this in terms of achievement makes it seem like the child somehow has a deficit, right? When they say the words achievement gap, or it seems directly tied to that child's performance, instead of looking at it from a systemic view of how are you servicing this child, and how are you servicing them in a way that is culturally sensitive or congruent, right? And so we as a community have to understand that we forcibly integrated into the public education system that was already created to colonize. The public education system in the 16th and 1800s was a system that was created to make good citizens, okay? Now we enter forcibly in the 1900s after we had successful schools, but just wanted more resources. And here we are 50 some odd years later. How'd that play out, right? How did that play out on generations? And so we cannot afford to lose another generation to a system of colonization that does not accept them. Now, am I talking segregation? I'm talking sanctuary and protection. And if a Black person is without sanctuary in America, then your home becomes that sanctuary space. Looking for people that can offer exactly what your child needs so that they're not disintegrated, so that they're not devalued, so that they're not put in toxic environments where they're constantly talked down to. Children understand when they've been wronged, but sometimes cannot externalize because of their age or defend themselves in a proper way that we as adults would even be able to find challenging, like you did in class, right?
Absolutely.
And so we have to change and shift our mentality about how we do this. What is that going to look like, and how to customize what our children need best without the traditional way of thinking that was told to us was the way to go, because it hasn't protected or educated
I
us
think
well.
we even have to go deeper than that, because just as Mr. Green said, when you say achievement gap, you're blaming the learner.
Right.
You're not holding the system accountable. So if Mr. Green was a car salesman and he didn't sell any cars this month, and today is the 30th, we wouldn't blame the customers.
Right.
We wouldn't say there's something wrong with the customers. They need a car. They didn't buy it from him. It's not his fault. He can continue business as usual. We would say to him, today is July 30th. Tomorrow is the last day. You didn't sell any cars, so you need to do something different if you want to earn a living selling cars. So we put the focus on the learner, that there is a deficit, there's a problem, there's an issue with the learner, they're broken. And then the other layer to that, if you don't use the terminology like achievement gap, you can't get funding.
Right.
And that's the key. So if you don't have any money in order to provide the services, then how do you address the issue? So we really have to look at this 360 degrees. What language are we using to describe students? And also, what the research came out is that Black children get less compliments. And I had a little girl, she moved in out of the area, and first grader. And I mean, every book I put into that little sweetheart's hand, she could read it. I had her reading to her little group of first and second graders. And when her mom came, I told her, you know, I really enjoy your daughter. She's been taking over the reading group for me, and she reads really well. And the mom said, thank you so much. She said she's the only African-American girl in her classroom, and I thought she was doing well. And when I asked her teacher doing report cards, she told me she was average and that she was okay. And I thought, oh my goodness, you know, should I push her more? Should I provide her with more opportunities? And I said, Your daughter, if you look at that classroom's test scores on the state website, your daughter is the best reader in that class. And she
Right.
came to that class with that ability. She didn't get those skills from that class. And what we're going to do here is just provide her with an opportunity to shine. And she can read to the kindergartners, she can read to the first graders. They seem to enjoy it. And we actually had her choose books, work with her on words that she didn't understand, and then have her read aloud to others, or let someone read to her and then let them ask her what the words were. So when we created this interactive experience that empowered her and that engaged her, her reading even went up further. So we have to have educators who look for those type of experiences. And I will tell you, for the most part, educators are not aware that Black children are wallpaper. And we see that in the media. We see that even in terms of when I submit some marketing, and all of the children in my program are Black and brown. And then someone at the newspaper will change it and say that it's not universal. And they'll, because I have a math program or a magazine that's doing an article on me, and I'll use my real children, and I'll get permission from their parents, of course, showing them as scholars in this regional publication, and they'll change that photograph. They'll change that image. They'll make it all white children because we're representing math and saying, I think this fits better with what you're doing. And I have to specifically say to them, I need you to remove that picture. It does not fit my program and the children that I serve. And I want to use my real children, because at some point, my children are going to be accused of something. And when they are, I need media images out there in the public, which shows that they are scholars, which shows that they are children and not adults, which shows that they are contributing members of society who are trying to learn. This process goes very deep. And that's why we want culturally congruent educators, because we need to recognize what our children are going to face, and we need to be a part of preparing for that.
So really, to just keep it 100, you got to call it what it is. The white teachers, white female teachers, don't know how to teach Black students. And this country was built on protecting the white woman. And so what do? Instead of making and holding white teachers accountable, you say Black kids can't learn and Black parents don't care. And we bring it around with the parent involvement. And what does that mean? That's a sliding scale, and it all depends what's going on in their kids or their parents' household as to their involvement in the school district. But nothing is going to look the same. What we need is educators who have high expectations for Black students. And that's the standard in which we need to work from. But when you have educators who then, just like you said, Dr. McHenry, when a student comes in, they already have a different perception that that student can't learn. But we come from generations of geniuses. And that baby is a genius until we send them to the killing field.
And again, I need to address another issue, and that is our teacher training programs. And you're right, 85% of the teachers are white female. But also in these teacher training programs, we know that when students apply to these teacher training programs, they look at their social media profile. So you're a high school graduate, you want to get into college, you want to be a teacher. They look at your social media profile, and if you've done anything with social justice, that excludes you from that program right there, okay? So then the Black people who do get into those programs are generally colonized because they're required to answer information and see Black people as less than in order to get through the eye of the needle. So then when it's time to be hired by districts, the districts looks at your social media profile. And if there's anything on there about you've been involved with any kind of social justice, then you're a potential troublemaker, and then you don't get hired. So then what we get in terms of African American educators are people who have been educated and indoctrinated into these systems that Black people are the problem, and then they get out and graduate, and their role and their job is to police Black bodies. I just had my former, I'm her mentor, and she got Teacher of the Year after 5 years. And one of her primary complaints to me was that her white colleague would always send her discipline problems in her classroom. And so she was saying, I'm trying to teach and I'm trying to educate my students. And I am the discipline for her classroom, and my classroom is constantly being interrupted, but yet she has no classroom management, and I can send my children to her. I have to handle my issues within my classroom with my students. And so the Black educators have an additional burden of being the caretakers for people who are not culturally sensitive and who haven't learned the skills that they need to interact with Black students. There's an assumption Black students are feared. They are feared. They're considered dangerous. They're adultified. They're considered older than their chronological age. And so discipline is much more punitive and much more harsh with Black kids. So then the Black educator has a choice. Either I accept this role as a disciplinarian so that this child will not be so severely punished, or I try to hold these people accountable and say, learn the strategies that you need to learn in order to teach our children. That's no different than the slave owner who would have one slave, the straw boss, whip the other slave, and he would do it so that the enslaved person wouldn't be as physically harmed. That's what's happening in education. The more things change, the more things stay the same. But I want to impart upon you that the recent research in the last 10 years are supporting everything that we're saying. So
right.
this is,
and I have to say, and I have to validate what both of you are saying. Very true. Now here we are at this point, and Dr. McHenry, those people are not just in the education system. They're in civil rights organizations,
Yes.
Criminal justice systems, you name it, who are put out in front of us, but then to control us in some sense, are colonized, right? So, but what we're talking about, looking at this from this perspective, there's a great equalizer, right? That's not educator focused if the money follows the child. Now, if you allow children to be funded instead of systems, then the parent can choose quality education. The parent can decide what's best for their child, and be able to say, you know, here's a high quality model right here. I want to do that, instead of hindering, which we've seen with SB 98. It really harmed a lot of people's options, because those students that decided parents that decided to disenroll their kids after a certain date couldn't re-enroll and get funded. That shows you that the system's self-protecting. The great equalizer would be fund the child.
Right.
Let their parents choose where that child gets to go. And
well,
you know what? Just like
that's the only thing that's going to change the system.
right.
Because once you start to give parent choices, once parents can say, no, I don't want my child in this particular school, in this particular program, I'm going to choose one that's different, then that previous program, that previous system has to shift to accommodate that.
Right. And that's a really competitive thing. And Jerry, you can speak to this because of the business model. We're talking about that, right?
Right.
You know what happened, and I thought about this when you were talking. I remember when I was younger, there was a cup of coffee that a lady purchased from McDonald's, and it burned her mouth.
Correct.
Now, McDonald's had to change their lids and say, caution, the coffee is hot, right? You can't come out and slam this lady and every other person that their mouth gets burned when they drink the cup of coffee, or people are not going to shop there and buy your stuff. And so that's what we see. Like, we have to shift our mentalities and stop subscribing to places that are not providing what we're looking for.
So understand, and let me backtrack to what Dr. McHenry was saying. And that's my PSA number 6. And it's called Crossing the Educational Yellow Line. The educational yellow line is just as strong as the blue line of law enforcement, or probably stronger, because what we have and what we see in districts is the director of safety many times now are Black. The vice principal, who is Black, their jobs are to maintain and keep Black folks in line. So then what happens is, if you don't do that, now you're labeled a liability. Or if you actually advocate for a student, you're labeled a liability, and the district now has a target on your back to get rid of you, because your quote is the quote, you're not a team player, which means is you're not going to protect the district at all costs. The district will lie, steal, rob, because we see how they're doing it when they get money in, supposedly to help the Black student, and change 7 words. And me and Dr. McHenry was in a meeting where assistant superintendent told us he could change 7 words on a proposal and redirect the money. And that's the game they're running. So our kids are being pimped, and our kids are being used as a new cotton, because they continue to get this money and not delivering a quality product, which is education. And then along with that, you have an institution of white women, which is the education system, and they're dealing with the ADA, average daily attendant, with money, and then they shift the right over to white males, which is the criminal justice system.
Right.
The problem with having SROs on campus, school resource officers or police, is that now the administrators use the SRO as the pit bull and put them on every situation. Instead of addressing ed codes, they're making a penal code. I have a situation right now with a school up north. 5 students were fighting, only 1 Black student. The campus supervisor called the police. The Black student got arrested. All that should have been was mutual combat, and everyone should have got 3 to 5 days. It should have been a case. True, if you assault each other, it could be a case, but it don't have to be. So out of 5 students, the Black student's the only one who actually caught a case. The actual school district sent out a letter and said they were out of policy how the campus supervisor dealt with that. But that's what we see. They're exposing our kids to the criminal system when they can't even be kids. Right. When you grow up, you fight someone, you disagree, you come back tomorrow, you fight again. Sooner or later, someone's going to get tired, or it's going to be addressed, or someone's going to win, and that's enough. But now, anything that's small that happens with a Black student, when a Black student or a Black employee is assaulted, then the district is slow to move. But when a Black student or a Black employee are accused, the districts are quick to respond and quick to judge.
And so, Jerry, I got to ask you a question, because this is something that I'm very challenged by.
Okay.
You know, I have dear friends that mean well, they're educators, they're in the system, and you've been to meetings and you hear about all the ways they want to fight from the inside to change things. But what we know and what we've seen is that they're really, really up against it, and changing the system that way is not, I don't see that happening, right?
Okay.
And I don't want to be negative about their efforts. I'm just being a realist. You know, being a prior public education employee, knowing, you know, outnumbered, all of that. What do you say, and how do you feel about those people that believe for 15, 20 years that they can change this from the inside?
Well, I say this right here, and that's why I do what I do, is you're going to have to fight the system, but you're not going to change the system. And the system really is not even going to modify for you. They're going to label it and put a new tag on it, but still be the same thing. Again, the issues haven't changed. Only things that's changing is the players. The game is still the same.
Right.
So the way to affect the district, only thing district understand is two things. That's money and legislation. And with that, the first thing that the parent can control is the money by pulling their kid out the district.
Right.
And then with that, and again, they can set up a model to where you get 5 to 10 parents together, and on Monday you're at this person's house and they're teaching this subject. And you can move around and get your kid the education. I talked to a parent yesterday and she said, Jerry, my son was way behind because he didn't have to deal with all the nonsense at the school district. Now he's caught up and he's advanced because he don't have to navigate the landmines of the school employees who's out targeted and looking for him to do something wrong.
Right.
All kids are going to do something wrong, but give them all the same latitude to make mistakes and grow from it and make it a teachable moment. That's the issue. Our kids don't get a chance to make a mistake. You know, I had a student, and Dr. McHenry, she was in on this case with me out in Hemet. This baby at 7 years old was arrested and put in handcuffs. So the things you see on the national news are many times the same cases I'm dealing with myself in the work we do. In the district, again, they thought, oh, well, we didn't know what to do. We called the police. The police are not the solve all and cure all to what's going on in school. You got to make an environment.
Let me say in that particular case that the teacher nor the supporting staff were trained to deal with the special needs of that child. And so when you have a child on the spectrum and you have a teacher who's a recent graduate, no experience, has no specialization and special ed, only had one class, and that's the class about integration in the law. And then you put that new teacher with a group of students that have special needs, and her only response to that is to cry and say she cares. Caring is absolutely wonderful. But just like a doctor, if you went to the hospital, if you got hit by a car and the doctor started crying and said, I didn't really go to med school, so I don't know what to do for you, that hospital would be liable, that institution would be liable, and that doctor should not be in that position because he doesn't have the proper credentials. And we have to look at that when it comes to our children, that people feel that as long as there's a body there, that the child is secondary and the person that's there is primary. But yet we know that if that was our loved ones, we wouldn't have somebody with a pair of pliers remove a tooth from our mouth.
Right.
We want a credentialed, certified, trained dentist that's been under the supervision of another dentist and who knows absolutely what he or she is doing. Many times with our children, we'll have an adult there and we'll say that they're doing the best they can and you need to accept that. And we don't need to accept that.
No. And I have to say, Dr. McHenry, before we close, and I want you guys to give a final thought, we'll definitely have to have more of these conversations. You guys know we could talk about this all day and still be acting, participating, and trying to move it forward. But, what you're saying is absolutely right. My son, was by first grade, and he's a kinesthetic learner. He has to be moving. He processes while he's moving. He has to be able to show you that what he learned so he can master it, and he was in a dual language program. And they had already instituted a 3-strike system for him because he couldn't be still, because he's at the desk and he's, rocking. It was because he couldn't sit there all day. He needed to rotate every 10 or 15 minutes. He needed to be doing something other than being shoved a pencil and a paper and saying, do this. He needed to be actively participating. I asked for them to put him in leadership roles, have him do some things where he's active, more than sitting. That didn't happen. So they stigmatized, labeled, didn't support him, didn't service him. I pulled him out. But the harm that it does for him knowing that for that kindergarten, first, second grade, the other students wouldn't play with him because he was ostracized so much. And they didn't want to be connected to the trouble, right? He was picking up trash as if it was Caltrans outside while other kids were playing. And, you know, what does that do to a 6, 7, 8-year-old growing mind about themselves? Now, when I took my son out and I tested him, he was above grade level, okay? He was in 3rd grade testing at 4.5 grade, okay? And really, it was not, the deficit was not in him, it was in the fact that they could not support his modality of learning. They could not support the way that he just got information and externalized it. And so that really, really, really opened my eyes up to the fact that even if you are an overachiever, they don't catch it. The gate, the magnet, the cluster, the AP is not gonna be dispersed to all the children that should be able to thrive in those situations, right? And the punishment alone harms our children in a way that they don't really recover from. There's children that are 6 and 7 that have suicidal ideations because of things that their classmates and educators and administrators have said to them, and it kills their spirit. And it takes some time in the home to like detox them from that. And so moving forward, you know, and I'd like for you to give your information too, so that if people want to reach out to you, that would be great. What advice would you give to parents in this time right now, where we're at, looking to effectively educate their children, quality education?
Okay, I'm going to speak first because you said some things in that example that are really important. The research shows that we need to change activities every 20 minutes. So my grandson, like your son, the teacher had them basically to do pencil and paper desk activities for the last 45 to 50 minutes. I presented her with the research that shows that that was inappropriate and that you should change activities every 20 minutes. And the response from her, as well as the school, was that the last 45 minutes, she was tired. And so therefore, because she was tired, the students had to be still, and those who couldn't, something was wrong with them, and that we needed to provide them with education. The other issue is that the research shows that in African-American families, we tend to be more physical. We do have larger muscles. If you look at the muscles of Africans, if you look at the muscles of athletes, it will show you that we have larger muscles. And so we do need to be physical, and that level of physical activity is acceptable. That level of physical activity in Anglo-American environments, when a dark-skinned person is moving around a lot, that person is considered to be a threat. And you can see that permeated throughout our society. So I think what we have to do as a community, we have to do this as a community. We have to embrace our children, and we have to embrace and educate our educators. We have to let them know that we are not the problem, that there are strategies, there are techniques, there's information, historical information that we need to include when we're working with our children to create the leaders of the 21st century.
Thank you. Jerry?
I'll start off with my story. So they wanted to hold me back in kindergarten, but my mother said, no, push them to 1st grade, let's see what happens. So then they held me back in 1st grade. But the reason is because I was too immature to just sit down and listen, or maybe even had a different learning style than what they were teaching. And so with that, we learned that each child needs their needs met when they need to be met. And even though I was immature, why do we force our kids into a system so early? We hear about red shirt freshmen when kids or young people go to college and they don't play sports the first year. What about a red shirt 5-year-old? Will we keep them out another year, let them get more mature before we put them in a system with these lions. Other thing is equality versus equity. Equality means every kid gets a pair of shoes. Equity means every kid gets a pair of shoes that fit. So the
Right.
school system is supposed to meet every kid where they are. Doesn't mean the kid has to come up. It means the school district has to meet the student wherever they are. And something that's going on right now is that students with special needs are not getting any support services. Meaning
And that's illegal.
behavioral, speech, and everything else that comes with that with kids on the spectrum are not getting that. Kids on the spectrum, and I have a client who owns an NPS, were used to going to school being on routine. Soon as this happened, then the public schools were to cut funding and do everything else but meet the needs of these students. And we know that's illegal, but their districts will try to do anything they can to keep money. They will put subcontractors and make them jump through hoops to service students when they could never meet that student needs. They'll make people go through hell and high water to try to meet needs that they never could. We had a situation where a school district was telling their students that, hey, we could get you caught up within a 2 to 3 hour time frame, 2 hours a day over a 6 to 9 month period. How the hell are you going to do that when they're two to 3 grades behind already up under your system?
Right. Exactly.
It don't make sense. And the other thing is, we know that Black students and Black people can excel long as we know the rules. The unwritten rule that our kids have to navigate through these landmines, meeting these teachers and other staff members who don't like them, is just something a baby's not ready to do. If we just gave them a little support, we'll see the numbers skyrocket. And that's what we have to do as a community, as a household, and as districts. We have to meet Black students where they are.
I totally agree. I totally agree. How do people find you guys? And I have tagged you. I tagged them on my page in today's show. You can always contact me for more information, Christina at npunion.org. But how will people be able to reach out to you for more information?
Dr. Darlena McHenry, my email address is stcareycenterinfo@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to meet me, to find me. I also have a website, www.stcareyscenter, STCARRIES, Center, CENTER, all one word, .org. You can contact me that way. I would love to hear, other people's perspective and to engage.
Thank you so much for coming.
My website, theblackstudentadvocate.com, blackstudentadvocate.com, #BlackStudentAdvocate. Again, we out serving families. We take calls from parents all over the country. And again, end result, your kid deserves the education that you're paying for.
Thank you so much for coming. And thank you to all my national viewers for watching. I will be back with Managing Day to Day on Tuesday, as always, with these wonderful guests. And so I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Get some rest, get refreshed, relaxation. We live to fight another day. And so you have been watching Managing Day to Day with me, Christina Laster, and National Parents Union. I hope you're all well. I hope that you all thrive. Goodbye, America's beautiful children. We love you, and we will see you again. Bye-bye.